Hey everybody! As you may already know, I had some downtime on the channel recently because my old computer was in need of some really major surgery. I had built it myself about 8 years ago and it was still a really good system despite its age, but it was having a hard time pumping out enough power for editing and rendering videos. And, well, it was really just time for a thorough system cleanup. So I decided to buy some new parts and build myself an upgrade. And here you can see in the picture, I actually was successful. This is my setup with my newly rebuilt machine. I have an adjustable desk. It's got arms to mount 2 monitors, and I don't have those attached yet. But the computer, you can see here, is mounted underneath, so it actually moves up and down along with the desk. Now, when it comes to building computers, I am a complete novice. I had done it twice before this one, once 8 years ago, and I did it again last fall for my daughter. And I'll say I find it actually a pretty terrifying experience. But I am a really stubborn person, and I learned long ago that the only way to get exactly what you want is to do it yourself. So that's why I have jumped into this with both feet. Now, when I started planning for the upgrade, I decided to keep 3 components from my previous system. I kept the power supply, which is a Corsair 850, the graphics card, which I had upgraded not too long ago to a GeForce GTX 1070, and the case itself, which is actually a really nice case. It's a Lancool PC K62. After doing my research, I decided to buy the following new components. An Aorus Z390 Ultra Gaming Motherboard, Intel i7-9700K, Samsung M.2 SSDs, 2 of them at 1 terabyte each because videos take up a huge amount of space. I got 32 juicy gigabytes of RAM from Corsair and a Corsair H100i Pro liquid cooling system. So to get started, I backed everything up that I wanted to keep from my old computer onto a SanDisk 2 terabyte external drive. I needed a big one because I have a lot of video footage. And then I powered off, unplugged, and gutted the case. I even took out the old hard drive cage since I wasn't going to need it, and I really thought I could use the extra space. I wanted to take out the little cage thing that's there to hold the optical drive, but it's like hard welded in and I couldn't get it out, so I just made do with that in there. And you can see here that even though I have actually cleaned this a couple times, even in recent years, it was filthy inside. I couldn't believe how dirty it was. Look at all that dust. And oh my gosh, there's even cobwebs. So I don't know if I'm growing spiders inside this thing or what. So I took my trusty dust attracting Swiffer and I got some compressed air and I went to town cleaning it out. And here you can see how much dirt I actually got off on these Swiffers. Ugh, it was just disgusting. But finally, in the end, I had a nice, fresh, clean case all ready to go. So then it was time for reassembly. I had found a great guide when I did my daughter's computer in the fall from Tech Radar called The Step-by-Step Guide to Building the Best PC. And so I pulled that out and used that again. And I also very carefully read and reread, probably about 10 times, the instructions that came with each of the components so I could be sure I got them in correctly. I had confirmed that the motherboard would fit in my case before buying it, so luckily it was easy enough to position it right on the standoffs and screw it into place. The 2 M.2 SSD cards were actually a little bit hard for me to figure out at first. There were these cool heatsink covers that I didn't expect, but of course that was kind of logical once I looked at it a little bit more. But I couldn't really figure out how to get them installed. They didn't want to screw into place. And when I referred again to the motherboard instruction booklet, there were some standoff screws that actually I needed to pull out of the box, and they were hiding way down in the bottom underneath all of the extra packing. And then once I found those and figured it out, it was pretty straightforward to get those fastened in place. Then I took the plastic off of the heat sinks and screwed them back in place over the M.2 cards. Now the motherboard came with this cool little plastic organizer piece for all the different case connections. So I just matched up all the wires and got those inserted in the right spots. remembering that I had to do a lot of digging in the fall to figure this out, but black arrow here is for the positive side. And then to finish up that connection, I just fit this little organizer piece right onto the multicolored section there on the motherboard, aligning all the pins and labels, and clicked it into place. Now, for the CPU, I needed both hands and also for the heatsink to get those attached. So I don't have any pictures of those. I really didn't want to accidentally mess that up by dropping anything, so I didn't even try to take any pictures. And the crazy thing about this part was I had checked to make sure. The case has a large cutout in the back. And so I thought that I would be able to mount or install the heatsink mount after I had installed the motherboard. But it turns out that they didn't actually align. The mounting holes were just a little too far off to the side. So after I had all this in, I actually had to take it all back out again so I could get the mounting block in place and then put the motherboard and everything back in as well. Then for the radiator and the fans for the coolant system, I really had to improvise on this. This K62 case doesn't have an obvious place to put a liquid cooling system. So what I ended up doing is really not correct. So I guess don't do what I did. But I was desperate, so I figured out a way to make this work. What I did was to wedge the radiator up against the top panel of the case on the inside. I replaced one of the case fan screws, the fans on the outside, with one of the long radiator screws and lined up the holes so I could use that to attach the radiator using that one long screw. And so even though there was only one screw actually sort of officially holding it in place, it was actually wedged in there really tightly by some of the other components and the case. So it felt very secure. The new fans that came with it would actually not fit squarely over the radiator. They were close, but not quite, so I could only attach one corner of each to the radiator, but I didn't want them wiggling around, so I made strategic use of some zip ties to get them all snug into place so that they wouldn't move. And so far, it actually all seems to be working fine. So I know it's a bit of a cobbled together crazy way to do it, but I think it's going to work. So then for the video card, I had some trouble installing the video card, but only because for some reason I've had a hard time with this every time I've done it, getting those little slots lined up, or the little tabs that have to go through those back panels of the case, getting those lined up while I'm actually trying to get the slots into the motherboard at the same time. Surely there's got to be a better way to do that, because I find that to be really a pain. Okay, then to connect all the power cables, luckily there were plenty of fan plugins on the motherboard, and there were plenty of cables for power. The only real issue I had here was that I tried to use two PCIe plugs for power to the motherboard, because that's how my old computer had been set up. But the configuration really didn't match on this new motherboard, and it confused me for a while. So first I actually did a really bad thing, and I plugged them in kind of however I could, but the computer wouldn't turn on when I tested it. So clearly that wasn't right. So I did a little Googling, and then finally learned that you aren't supposed to use the PCIe plugs on the motherboard, even though that actually had worked before, because that's how my other computer had been set up. But luckily I had another previously unused plug available for power, and that one fit into those slots perfectly, and so the problem was solved. So then, with that done, I turned the system on, and it all booted up fine. I organized all the cables as best I could. I'm not that great at doing this, but I did the best I could. Bungeed them together and left them, resting in the nice open space that I now had in the case. And here you can see a shot of the screen after it's booted up. And then here's a final shot inside the case with everything done and turned on, and it looks so pretty. So excited. So I'm really happy with my workspace, and the rebuilt computer seems so far to be working great. I'm even sort of grudgingly managing to deal with Windows 10, which I was not excited about, and I actually had not put on my other computer. I am gradually getting all the software that I need loaded back onto the system. My first goal was to set up what I needed to finish the Uvelda playthrough videos, and I'm really relieved to say that I was able to do that and get my first new video done and uploaded. And oddly enough, the only real issue I had was trying to upload it to YouTube. I put some different antivirus software on my computer, and between that and Windows 10, I don't know if that is causing a problem, but I tried everything that I could think of. I Googled all kinds of different advice, putting in exceptions, checking security settings, firewalls, antivirus settings, rebooting, etc., etc. But what would happen is when I would go to upload the video, it would hit 3% straight away, and then it just wouldn't move for hours. When I looked at the task manager, it actually didn't even look like anything was transferring. So I don't know what the problem was. I still don't know what the problem was, but I found a workaround hidden in a really obscure suggestion on a random message board somewhere. And that was to open a private browser window in Firefox and do it from there. And lo and behold, that worked like a charm. Thank goodness. Because after the hours and hours I spent struggling with this, it was very disheartening. So that's it. I'm almost fully back in action, and my plan is to finish Yvelda as soon as I can, to work on a new storytelling Skyrim series that I actually have all written. I just need to figure out how I want to record that. Work through Assassin's Creed with my daughter. We haven't forgotten about that. I might play and record a new game. I have several new games I really want to try. And then last but not least, somehow I still want to squeeze in a few Skyrim modding adventures because I do still enjoy playing around with some of the mods. So thank you so much for joining me on this little tour of my rebuild. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!